Hello, this is Chris from Idealism, and today we are going to be assessing the strong objections to idealism. This is, of course, brought to you by Cal Allender. So first, we have the first argument, which is the unconscious causation objection. So neuroscience shows that unconscious influences cause our consciousness to make decisions, even up to a full 10 seconds before we are aware. Before we address the most important aspect of this objection, which is the unconsciousness problem, that will be discussed in the next slide. We have actually already done a video series, which is the free will series, on why, at least dealing with the first part of this argument, which is having to do with unconscious influences causing our consciousness. So, number one, the readiness potential, or the unconsciousness causation, is present even when subjects are not making conscious choices, and therefore the readiness potential cannot be the cause of conscious decisions. Number two, researchers have identified a point of no return in self-initiated movement, which supports the interpretation that the mind has the ability to veto the readiness potential so that free will may take place in decision making. Then finally, Miles has discovered that the readiness potential is absent when a subject makes a deliberate rather than arbitrary choice. The experiments in 2008 by Soon therefore cannot be counted as evidence against free will due to the fact that the subjects were making arbitrary rather than deliberate choices, and therefore any previous studies that involved arbitrary choices cannot be counted as evidence against free will. So this is kind of a review for those that watched my series on free will, but I'm bringing this back because it has to do with the first part of this objection, which is the claim that neuroscience shows that unconscious influences causes our consciousness, and given these studies, that's actually not the case. The bottom line is that there is very little unconscious causation that is influencing our decision. At best, it influences our arbitrary choices, but it does not cause all of our decision making. The important part of this argument, however, is having to do with the unconsciousness, so we will address this in the next slide. So what is this problem of unconsciousness that we're dealing with here? Well, first of all, this is perhaps the best argument against idealism, since it has to do specifically with the unconsciousness within our universe and our private mental lives. We become unconscious very often, but if all is in consciousness, then there should be nothing truly unconscious in the universe. But since we do experience unconsciousness often, an example would be not remembering our dreams or getting knocked out by the head, then it's more likely that there is something beyond consciousness that can explain these phenomena, or at least that consciousness is not all that exists in reality. And so how would we deal with this? Well, first of all, to put it more simply, there is an easy syllogism that one can use to actually make this problem harder for idealists to deal with. So this is the argument. Premise 1. If idealism is true, then all that exists is the ontology of consciousness. Premise 2. We know of unconscious processes in nature and in our own private minds. Conclusion, therefore, there is at least one thing that is not conscious, and thus idealism is false. And so how do we actually deal with this argument here? Well, so let's kind of assess this. So in our video dealing with the distinction between consciousness proper and self-reflexive consciousness, we see there needs to be a distinction between these two things. So first, consciousness proper is the mental activity is conscious if and only if there is anything it is like to have such mental activity in and of itself. And so this would be the ontological primitive of reality under idealism. Then the second view, or the second definition, would be self-reflexive consciousness or awareness, and this is the conscious knowledge of the experience which comes in addition to the experience itself. And so the problem of unconsciousness is solved when we realize this important distinction between our knowledge of experience and experience itself. One can experience something and be conscious of it without the knowledge of this experience. In our breathing and in our dreams, we mostly lack the knowledge and awareness of these things, but we still experience them on a daily basis, even if we're not totally aware of them. So, for more information regarding this distinction, see my older video, but basically, we can solve the problem of unconsciousness when we make this distinction. And so, everything that exists in reality is consciousness proper, but not everything that exists is self-reflexive consciousness. So I think once we understand this distinction, we could, again, solve this problem. And so, summary of this entire series so far. So we looked into the main objections to idealism in this series and have shown why none of them are successful in refuting the ontology of idealism. And so we addressed the main objections that deal with the unconsciousness and show that the what we call the unconscious is really just consciousness outside our self-reflection, or again, outside our self-awareness and our self-reflexive consciousness. So that deals with the biggest objection to idealism. Then we address and explain how idealism accounts for our shared world and private minds, as well as explaining the scientific evidence for brain activity being correlated with mental activities. Then we explained how idealism fully accounts for the order in our universe and why things follow natural laws. Then we address popular misconceptions of idealism regarding solipsism and have shown the flaws with assuming that concreteness is an objection to the ontology of idealism. And so once idealism is properly understood, then we can understand that there is no good reasons for denying such a robust ontology. And so that will be the conclusion of my video as well as this series. Thank you guys for watching, and have a nice day.